what we just witnessed today. It's brutal.
Obviously brutal.
The S&P dropping nearly 20% for its fourth worst performance since the Second World War.
This is a huge divergence of a kind that has never happened other than the super bubbles of 1929 and 2000.
If you felt that your financial future seems a little bit dimmer than it did a few years ago, you aren't alone. The 2020 health crisis and federal government responses from around the world plunged the financial system into a precarious position, raining on everyone's parade. In today's video, we're going to examine some of the most blatant signs that we're heading towards an economic disaster, which we may already be in. Make sure you stick around until the end though, this is profit protection after all, and we'll list off a few quick tips for coming out the other side of these tough economic times with your finances a little more intact. Thanks for tuning in as always, let's get started. Have you heard of the University of Michigan's Consumer Sentiment Report? This is a monthly survey that measures the attitudes and expectations of consumers regarding the economy and their personal financial situation. The report is conducted by the University of Michigan's Survey Research Center and is based on telephone interviews with a representative sample of American households. The report includes measures of consumer confidence, consumer expectations, and consumer perceptions of current economic conditions. The first major sign we're covering today is the recent results of this report. The sentiment among consumers is decidedly negative compared to a year ago, about 15% worse in fact. Not only that, but 65% of consumers expect unfavorable developments in the year ahead. Furthermore, unemployment expectations continue to worsen. About 45% of consumers expect unemployment to rise in the year ahead, the largest share since April 2020 as the economy shut down from the pandemic. The university's Consumer Sentiment Report is widely followed by economists, financial analysts, and policymakers because consumer sentiment can provide valuable insights into the direction of the economy. For example, if consumer sentiment is high, it may indicate that consumers are feeling confident about their personal financial situation and the economy, which could lead to increased spending and economic growth. On the other hand, if consumer sentiment is low, it may indicate that consumers are feeling less confident about their personal financial situation and the economy, which could lead to decreased spending and economic contraction. This may in part be due to uneasiness about how well countries can continue to recover. Some countries like China are still being impacted by COVID numbers. This is causing plenty of uncertainty in economic markets. China has taken a number of steps to try and control the spread of COVID-19 within its borders. When the virus first emerged in Wuhan, the Chinese government implemented measures such as quarantining the city, closing transportation and public places, and conducting widespread testing and contact tracing. As the virus spread to other parts of the country, the government implemented similar measures in other affected areas. As of now, it's being reported by individual provinces in China that they may have millions of cases rearing their heads at the moment, but this is a major contrast to the few thousands being reported by the federal government's health commission. This is causing major uncertainty for investors within and outside the country. Together, the shortage of medication and high case counts in far-flung cities in recent days paints a picture of a virus that is spreading far faster than experts had estimated. Jin Dongyan, a virologist at the University of Hong Kong, said, "We expected explosive outbreaks," he said, "but this is much more devastating than the one in Hong Kong earlier this year." There is not a ton of optimism in the financial world in the United States, not just China and not just among consumers. Even economists are continuing to warn about an impending recession. Harvard economist Kenneth Rogoff issued a dire warning at the beginning of November on Mornings with Maria about the U.S. economy, one day after Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell announced his hawkish stance. "You really have to look at the world, which is in bad shape," the economics professor said. "So it's very hard for the United States to resist that. I worry that we're not only going to get a mild recession, I think the chances that we've got a significant recession are really pretty high." One of these indicators that a recession is still imminent, a warning sign that everyone is feeling, is rising inflation. Inflation continues to affect nearly everything on the planet, and it is still high. And it means that the cost of living is increasing, and it takes more money to purchase the same goods and services as before. Rising inflation can be a sign of tough economic times ahead because it can reduce the purchasing power of consumers and businesses, leading to decreased demand and economic growth. There are a number of factors that can contribute to rising inflation, such as an increase in the cost of raw materials, an increase in wages, or an increase in the money supply. Inflation can also be caused by a decrease in the supply of goods and services, which can occur during times of economic downturn or when there is a sudden increase in demand for certain goods and services. Inflation can have a number of negative consequences for the economy, including reduced economic growth, decreased investment, and increased uncertainty. This rise in the cost of living is compounding to create more worrying signs as it is not being compensated with higher wages. In turn, employees are quitting and not returning to the traditional job industries. This is another huge red flag for the economic outlook. When the workforce begins to quit jobs faster than they are being filled, it can be a sign of a tight labor market, which can have a number of implications for the economy. A tight labor market can have negative consequences for the economy. For example, it can lead to higher production costs for businesses as they try to attract and retain workers, which may lead to higher prices for goods and services. This can lead to higher inflation, which can reduce the purchasing power of consumers and businesses. Additionally, a tight labor market can make it more difficult for businesses to find the workers they need to meet demand, which can limit economic growth as well. This impacts everyone, whether they are currently employed or not. With things getting tougher and tougher for consumers, it's worth noting that another worrying sign of impending economic disaster can be found in how dependent the US is on consumer spending. Consumer spending is a major contributor to a country's gross domestic product, which is the value of all goods and services produced within a country over a given period of time. When consumer spending decreases, it can have a negative impact on the GDP. For this reason, it should make you somewhat uneasy that 68.2% of the nation's GDP is made up of consumer spending. Consumer spending tends to decline during economic downturns or recessions when people feel less confident about their personal financial situation and are more likely to cut back on non-essential purchases. This can lead to a decline in demand for goods and services, which can cause businesses to reduce production, leading to a decline in GDP. These warning signs are certainly worrying, but it's best to not get panicked. Focusing on educating yourself and keeping your ear to the ground on financial news is the best way to handle the rapidly changing monetary environment. If you want to learn more about official viewpoints on economic disaster, check out our latest video on the World Bank's comments on an economic collapse. Despite all this doom and gloom talk, you aren't destined to lose everything as the economy continues to decline. Actually, here are 5 ways you can protect your personal finances against a recession. Build up an emergency fund. It's always a good idea to have some extra cash saved up for a rainy day. During a recession, this cushion can be a lifesaver if you lose your job or have unexpected expenses. Aim to save enough to cover 3 to 6 months of living expenses. Pay down debt. If you have a lot of high interest debt like credit card balances or personal loans, now is a good time to focus on paying it off. This will free up more cash flow and make it easier to handle your expenses during a recession. Cut costs. A recession is a good time to review your budget and see where you can cut back. Look for ways to save money on things like subscriptions, insurance, and other bills. You might also consider downsizing your living arrangements to save on rent or mortgage payments. Diversify your investments. Different types of investments perform differently during a recession. For example, stocks may go down in value while bonds and other fixed income investments may hold up better. And consider spreading your money across different asset classes like stocks, bonds, and cash to reduce your risk. Last but certainly not least, stay informed and make a plan. Keep an eye on economic indicators and be aware of what's happening in the economy. This will help you make smart decisions about your personal finances and come up with a plan for navigating a recession. It's also a good idea to review your financial goals and priorities and make any necessary adjustments. Tuning into profit protection is one easy and simple way to check off that last step. For that reason, we're going to continue posting high quality content that both educates and entertains you. The best way to show your support is to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We appreciate you watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one.